You're listening in on an animated discussion about Superman the Animated Series with two experts in their fields. I'm Joshua Unruh, superhero scholar.
And I'm Caleb Masters, your friendly neighborhood film critic extraordinaire from thecinematropolis.com. And today's topic is action figures. You know, Joshua, I've got to say, when I saw the name for this episode, I was pretty jazzed because I was thinking of an entirely different episode and felt incredibly let down that there were not more action figure type characters in this specific episode. I wanted a variety pack. I wanted 7 villains, okay? I didn't just want Metallo back. That said, hey, Metallo's back.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, before we got into it and I was like, oh, this is Metallo's return, I was like, ooh, Toy Man. Let's see what they do with Toy Man. But that's not what it was. It's Metallo. Yeah, he's back, and welcome back. Caleb, I have to tell you something before we dive into talking about this particular episode, but Metallo has it on my mind. I have actually spent some of the last week revisiting my opinion about Superman's Rogues Gallery, and I think that it might actually be a little bit above average. I'm changing my mind. I'm still not going to put it on par with like Spider-Man's or Flash's or Batman's, but I think it's moving up in my estimation. I just wasn't giving enough credit to some of these guys that are really, really interesting, almost kind of cracked mirrors, you know, of Superman. You've, of course, got Lex, who is all brain, no brawn, which is not exactly, you know, Superman, because he's pretty smart. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, but he's also immoral. There's a lot of cracked mirror with Lex. He's immoral. There's a lot
right.
There.
Yeah. But I mean, you know, on the surface, it's like brains versus brawn, you know, kind of thing. And then with Metallo, they really bring it out like, you know, the Man of Steel. He's Steel Man, which we'll do with another character later. But, you know, we'll put that aside for now. I'm just coming around. Mr. Mixel-Splitlick, Metallo, the Parasite is a real one-note villain, but he's actually better than I give him credit for, especially up against Superman. I'm just saying this episode is further putting arrows in my quiver that maybe Superman's Rogues Gallery is not as bad as I have been saying for some time.
You know, Joshua, here's all I'll say about that. I've always thought Superman had a better than average, but not great Rogues Gallery, because I think the exceptional villains in the Rogues Gallery are truly exceptional. I love Brainiac. I love Lex Luthor. Mix is fun. But I also think, to your point, though, some of these like lower level people that maybe we don't think about because they're not as iconic, or maybe it's just because they haven't at least been featured in the mainstream, at least in this way, in a while, but like Toy Man, like Metallo, Parasite you mentioned, they all have strong gimmicks that work to varying degrees that I would say make them above average, like B to C listers.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I think that what I'm coming to realize is kind of interesting to me is that some of these, like Parasite, against certain characters, Parasite would be like D-list. But against Superman, he's actually kind of A-list. How do I deal with this person that I literally can't get physically near when most of my abilities are very physical? You know, that's a lot less interesting if he's fighting somebody like Batman, who, you know, touching Batman might get you Olympic level athlete kind of stuff, but it's not necessarily going to elevate you in the way that a dash of Krypton will. And I think guys like the Flash could probably hit him so fast that he can't absorb much. And of course, you've got your favorite big green bubble with Green Lantern. But against Superman, let's be real, he's pretty powerful. And I think that's kind of how I feel about Metallo. Overall, Metallo against other people, C-, you know, and I'm really grading on a curve there because he is legitimately indestructible. But without that kryptonite heart, which isn't going to affect everybody in the way that it affects Superman, he doesn't get elevated. But as soon as you put him in the Superman story, he gets a lot better. And seeing him contrasted with Superman here during his memory loss, where we see that maybe John Corbin could have been a different guy if he weren't such a heel. You know, it's just, I'm coming around, and Metallo is helping me do that today.
Well, Joshua, I'm glad to hear that this episode did you some solids and change your mind about Metallo, because I got to say, it absolutely did not help me whatsoever on Metallo.
Oh,
I just
well,
like
that's
Metallo.
the Rogues Gallery as a whole, not necessarily Metallo. He's still doing his exact job, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to get into it in this episode, but first, maybe we should talk. We do have a new design, or at least one to speak of. Give us the rundown, Joshua.
Well, we've got all naked Metallo, as I'm calling him, and we have seen that look briefly when the body was on a table, right? Like we saw that before Corbin's mind was in it. But once Corbin's mind was in it, we only either saw it entirely as Corbin or partially ripped apart, you know, giving us kind of a scary half metal skeleton thing. This is our first real look at naked Metallo, and it's, you know, exactly what we would expect. I will say I feel like these kids just have a boundless optimism in assuming that he's a good guy, because even without having seen the Terminator, big chrome skeletons do not look like good guys to me. Maybe I'm crazy.
Especially the ones with like shiny green eyes. Yeah, they tend to weird me out too. If I was, you know, below 10 years old, I would be pretty freaked out.
And I think that DC Comics largely agrees with me, because the closest comic book equivalent that I can find to this look for Metallo is actually the 1980s look of Brainiac, which is a big chrome skeleton with an even bigger chrome brain poking out of the top of his chrome skull. So it's not good. I love these kids. I love how they're just like, yeah, you can be a good guy, Steel Man, but I'm just like, against all appearances. So it's good. It works. It does exactly what it's supposed to do.
Listen, Joshua, these kids are just real sweet, okay? They know that you don't, their dad drilled into them really well. Don't judge a book by its cover. They listened to that one. Unfortunately, they didn't listen to him when it come to the volcano. So, you know, kids.
Friends, do judge a volcano by its eruptions. If it's having one, go away from it, right? Hey, let's start with that. Caleb. Let's talk about Chekhov's volcano. I like it.
Thank you.
I like it a lot.
Thank you. I saw in your notes when you called it Chekhov's volcano. I wasn't quite so clever, but it is literally Chekhov's volcano. Why is... Okay, so here's the thing about this episode, Joshua. There's a lot of gimmicks in this episode that aren't bad gimmicks,
yes.
but I'm perpetually asking myself, wait, why are we doing this on a volcanic island? Why is Metallo losing us his memory? I don't really know that the plot justifies either of those decisions, but here we go. At least it adds some tension to, oh, clearly Superman's on a timer.
Okay, I agree with you about the memory thing, and we will get to it. But I think the volcano is great. It is classic action genre stuff. You know, Doc Savage or Indiana Jones or somebody like that getting into a tussle down the side of a volcano. This is a little less tropey, but you get something like that at the very, very end of Lord of the Rings. Spoiler warning for 100-year-old novel and movies that are 20 plus years old. Just, you know, move on. You guys get it. You're with me. Volcanoes are cool. And they are an unpredictable timer, because God knows that the action genre loves a timer, you know, a time bomb or a countdown till the thing is uploaded or whatever. But I think I like a timer that is a little unpredictable too. Like it's just going to be like 10, 9, 6 and just stare at you. 5, 3, 1, you know, right. I like it.
Well, Joshua, I love that idea that you're like, this volcano is going to go off in roughly 10 years. Oh, whoops, it skipped like 5 years early. Oh, surprise. And now we're not sure how to handle it. And even though we're kind of prepared, we're not fully prepared, as we see in this episode.
So I like the volcano in that it does give pressure, right, to the entire plot, which would otherwise... honestly, probably meander a little bit, you know, like it takes a minute for Metallo and Superman to come into contact, or even for Metallo and Lois to come into contact. It does 3 big things that I really like. So tell me what you think about these things and if you think they justify a volcanic island. First of all, it's a little light on action, right? Other than Metallo saving the truck driver, it's a little light on action, but we get to do a mid-episode action break as Superman has to reroute the lava and help people escape, you know?
Okay.
It's not huge, crime fighting stuff, but this is actually the stuff that in my personal headcanon, Superman spends most of his time doing, right? He doesn't need to fight crime most of the time. He needs to stop volcanoes from erupting or let them erupt in a less destructive way, stop tsunamis, help after earthquakes, right? So I like seeing that very much. That's my first thing.
Okay, strong first point. Strong first point, because I do like the idea of seeing Superman save people, and not, like you said, in a very like low level crime fighting way. In like hundreds of people are going to die if Superman doesn't show up. I like that.
Yeah, he fights disasters, right? Like, and in fact, in the way that I would describe Batman as a crime fighter, I wouldn't even describe Superman. I guess the closest I would say is he's like a super fireman. He really is usually just saving people, and a volcano lets us see that. Second thing I really like, the volcano erupting and the lava running down over Superman is a fantastic excuse for his radiation suit to get mostly ruined. Right? Like, even when he gets his face mask punched off, he's still mostly doing okay. He's mostly covered up. But then Metallo figures out, if I just shove him in the lava, it's going to melt the suit off and I'm back in the driver's seat. And that shows Corbin being a very smart fighter, because remember, he's a longtime mercenary before he even became Metallo. And it shows that Superman can plan ahead and be that Boy Scout and use his head, but that sometimes even planning ahead's not enough. I like that. It escalates the action during the fight very well.
Okay, that one doesn't work as well for me. So I'm not saying you're not wrong, but I don't know if it justifies the volcano for me personally. But you know, it's passable.
That's fair. I'll give it to you that is my weakest of the three. I think it's really a great use of the volcano, but I'm not going to say that one justifies it. This one I kind of love though. So, when Metallo and Superman are fighting next to a river of lava, it is reminiscent of those old action tropes of somebody fighting their nemesis next to a river, and there being that big fight of trying to push their head underwater, right? Like, I can't beat you, but I can drown you.
Right.
We instantly grok what this trope is when Metallo and Superman are rolling around next to a river of lava, and then Metallo pushes Superman's head under. Now, it's lava. He's Superman. He's going to be okay. But at the same time, we recognize the trope, but it's escalated to Superman levels. And I think that is A++ thinking myself.
Okay. I'll give you that one. And it's a great segue for the Superman power level check-in this week, which is, hey, you can drown him in lava and he'll still walk away slightly annoyed. Okay, like it's not like it really even scarred him at all.
Which seems right to me, by the way. That seems right to me because we've seen him covered in molten metal before, you know? So, yeah, so that power level check-in seems right to me. I feel like this Superman does have to breathe. We've established that he has to wear a spacesuit and stuff. So I guess if Metallo held him under the lava long enough, we would still get to the river drowning kind of space. But yeah, the heat itself, not really a big deal. And yet, not a thing any of us could survive. So it's like recognizable trope with Superman sauce.
Yes. Okay. So here is my counter argument. I don't actually disagree with you on points 1 or 3. I think that the volcano does add something to this episode. But here is sort of my counter argument is that outside of the volcano, I feel like they had a half-baked episode and they were in the writer's room thinking, well, how can we finish baking it? What bakes things? Heat. Volcano. Boom.
You know, okay. You're probably not wrong. Honestly, you're probably not wrong. At the same time, I really feel like that totally bakes it. So, man.
Listen,
I get you, but I feel like that actually finishes it, man. I don't know.
Listen, man, I like my cookies to be cooked all the way through, not a little squishy in the middle. Some people disagree. No, okay, that was a bad analogy. Okay, what I will say is I don't dislike the volcano, but I couldn't help but feeling there's this whole thing, and honestly, it probably relates more to the memory loss, which is my larger criticism here.
Yeah, like let's talk about that. That's a mess.
I feel like they had two half ideas that aren't necessarily at odds with each other, but neither of them quite work enough for it to really gel for me personally. Because I love the idea of the memory loss. I love the idea of nurture versus nature. Like, hey, maybe Metallo wouldn't be such a bad guy if, his dad had loved him at some point. Or he had a family.
No, that's legit, because it's always daddy issues all the way down. So you're right. That's a good point.
Especially with men. So anyway, I like that. That's cool. I like the flashbacks. I like this whole similar almost to Captain Marvel, which we see in the MCU, this whole partial fragmented memories slowly coming back to you in not the right order. Awesome stuff. But instead of it being a process of the memory coming back to him and him wrestling with, but I'm actually doing good things and enjoying it, and my villainy, it's like a light switch. It's partial memory. I'm doing nice things. That feels good. Oh, yeah, wait, this isn't who I am. I'm a bad guy. Well, screw you kids. It just... I feel like it could have been a lot better. That's what I'll say there. And because I don't feel like that works, it feels like everything else in the episode feels half-baked.
No, that perspective is right on. I have really mixed feelings about the memory loss, because I do think that they execute it in the moment, like in the moment-to-moment work or the scene-to-scene work, it really works. But I think at the plot level, it sort of doesn't. I mean, there's no reason for it. And I know we could backfill a reason for it, but we opened this with a fake news segment, right? That took a couple of minutes, which is not a lot, but we took 2 minutes on a news segment to reintroduce Metallo, when maybe him getting into a fight with a giant octopus and getting his head knocked against a rock, because remember, there's still a human brain in there, might have been a better use of our time. Just give us something.
And that's the real issue. And, I don't dislike Metallo. I especially like him as an assassin bounty hunter type. So that's why I actually think when they think through how they use him, I think there's some potential. I don't think this is the right step. And I think the questions they're asking about him are interesting, but they aren't handling it very well at all. And because of that, it makes me feel like Metallo is a throwaway villain.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong, because I do think that I like how quickly he flips back to being a bad guy as soon as he remembers who he is, because I think that makes sense, right? Oh, that's right. I'm John Corbin. I am, in fact, awful and all about myself. But the fact that he doesn't really seem to enjoy saving people, we don't have a moment where that causes any kind of conflict for anybody other than the kids. And that's not great, right? And I also have this feeling, tell me what you think about this, but I almost feel like him showing up on shore, having forgotten everything, kind of undermines the really menacing ending of his first appearance. When we left that, he was trudging back across the ocean floor with this horrible, baleful look on his face, and as soon as he got to shore, Lex was going to be in trouble, right? That was the flavor that we were left with. And then he just comes walking out of the water, and this time, and he's like, I don't know, who am I really? And it just undermines a really good thing on top of not setting up anything super spectacular here.
Right, and that's the thing. It doesn't feel like there's really much continuity between what we saw last time and this time. And then I actually don't recall what the next phase of Metallo is or what his next episode is. So I'm really eager to see what they do with him on round 3, whenever that day may come. But I did not feel like this was a follow-up that made a compelling case for a returning villain in Superman's Rogues Gallery.
I have one more kind of weird thing or thing that struck me as odd when it comes to the identity question about Metallo. At the very end, when he is mostly encased in rock and he can't see and he can't hear, and he is repeating to himself a mantra so he won't forget again. Right. Oh, finally, we figure out he just forgot who he was because he was under the ocean for a year. Okay, but this time he's doing a mantra, but instead of saying, I am John Corbin, the episode goes out with him saying, I am Metallo. Right. I am Metallo. And I'm like, again, you're bringing up a really interesting identity question, but I don't think you're actually very interested in it. You just haven't had anybody call him John Corbin this episode, so you can't have it go out on that note.
Right, but I think it does tell us something about the motivation of Metallo, which is pretty terrifying, which is this guy is revenge on legs. I mean, and he's a Terminator,
Sure.
because he wants vengeance against Superman, and he's just gonna continue to repeat that mantra over and over again. I am Metallo. I want to beat Superman. You know what I mean? Like, that's. I actually thought the ending of this was probably just one of the stronger moments of the entire episode.
No, it's super creepy. It is super creepy. But the fact that he described himself in his own mind as Metallo, I thought was an interesting question brought up. But much like the nature versus nurture, can he be a good guy if he forgets his old ways? They're not that interested in it. It's so weird that they bring these things up, but they're not really that interested in it. And maybe that's just a room full of writers, working together. We know how these kind of amalgam shows can go. So it just struck me as odd.
Right. And here's the other thing. I would say this is one of the cases where I do think a two-parter could have really made this a compelling.
Oh, sure.
Compelling story, because the ideas are not bad. None of them are bad. But because the sort of question at the heart of Metallo's arc in this episode is so half-baked and unclear and not exactly sure what it wants to do, or at least how it's going to get there, it renders everything else not as interesting or as good, at least for me. So I just think if they had actually taken time for him to wrestle with the identity in a really meaningful way, before embracing that he actually is evil Metallo, I think more time to breathe would have actually helped quite a bit.
I agree, because I have a surprising amount of empathy for Metallo in this episode. The existential dread over being trapped in a perfect sensory deprivation situation for a very long period of time. Like under the water, he probably couldn't really hear very well, or he couldn't hear in the way that he was used to, but at least he could see. He had input. But at the end, he specifically says, I can't hear anything. I can't see anything. It's just darkness. And I'm like, well, that's claustrophobic and terrifying. I feel really bad for Metallo. Kinda?
No, it is terrifying, and it's, again, the ending is extremely eerie. He's just stuck there, repeating in his head over and over again. It is, I would say, I go a step further. It's haunting, not just eerie.
Yeah.
It's haunting to think that is how driven he is to beat Superman.
Right. I got to keep my identity together in my own head just so I can murder the people I want to murder. Yeah, revenge on two legs. Unstoppable revenge on two legs is perfect. Oh my gosh, Caleb. Yes, you actually just made Metallo instead of John Corbin make sense to me there at the end, because John Corbin can't get revenge on Lex and Superman, but Metallo can. You made it work. You got me there.
Always happy to serve, Joshua. Always happy to serve.
I think that the only other really big sort of plot item that I wanted to talk about were these kids, right? These kids are kind of fantastic, I think. I wish they had more room to do kid stuff too, but the fact that they just believe Metallo into being good by insisting that he's good while he's a blank slate is beautiful. And I'm also going to give these kids a little bit of props, because you might think that they believe Metallo's story about being a robot from another galaxy because they're dumb kids, but I say to you that they believe it because they're dumb kids who live in the DC universe, and they know that stuff happens all the time.
They know what Superman's about. They know his backstory. Well, kind of know his backstory. They know he's not from Earth.
Right. So on one hand, sure, they're still dumb kids, but also I'm like, they believe that story because that story could happen in this universe. It's not that weird.
1000% yes. These kids are sweet. They're sweet. They believe big creepy machine man could be good, so I think that their dad must have is doing a bang up job raising them. If only they had listened about the volcano.
I'll tell you what else. They say something about Superman that really makes my heart sing. Because at one point, they look Metallo right in the eye and say, Superman wouldn't let anyone die no matter how bad they were. And I was like, oh man, these kids get it.
Yes. Well, Joshua, I don't have a lot more to add about this. I feel like I put it on the table. A couple of very, very small things that I just wanted to acknowledge. One, we get to see Clark. Anytime, I talk about this. Anytime we get to see, Batman being a billionaire philanthropist or Superman being, a reporter, you're always like, secret identity shenanigans. This is why they do this job. This is why they're in this position. And we see here that Clark actually hears about Metallo through a tip at the Daily Planet. And I was like, hey, looky there. It's almost like him being a reporter serves a real purpose. A lot of people don't realize that, but it's actually a really important part of why he chose that profession for his secret identity.
Yeah, that used to be on the label a really long time ago. They would specifically say a reporter at a major metropolitan newspaper so that he could keep his finger on the pulse of disasters that need his attention. I think that was from the radio, and I may not have gotten it 100% right, but I'm in the neighborhood.
I think that's that's kind of awesome. I wish we would still do that because I don't think people. Well, you know what? This is going to put me on my old man soapbox about people these days not even understanding the role of reporting anyway. So we're gonna sidestep that.
Oh yeah,
and focus on.
Listen, between the two of us, you and I could just go on a wild rant because I'm going to complain about how the largest chunk of superhero fiction has forgotten the importance of the secret identity, and it's vital to ongoing storytelling, I think. And then you get to come in and say, also, none of us understand reporting anymore, and you're right.
It's what a time to be alive. And the other thing I wanted to note here was just listen about these kids. Where did they find this disguise? I mean, I know they're kids, but I mean, this outfit is, hey, if we're trying to hide the fact that this guy's a robot, look at this guy who's going to stick out like a sore thumb no matter where he goes.
On the tropical volcanic island, let's get him a trench coat. That'll work out.
Trench coats have always been a great disguise.
Okay, I have two responses to that. And one is that I mostly really liked that disguise and how bad it was because it reminds me of the Thing from the Fantastic Four, because he would do that all the time. But he knew it wasn't making him like more subtle. He was just doing what he could do to not stand out quite so much, because that's the Ben Grimm way, right? Like, oh, I'm a monster. I guess I better at least try and hide some of my hideousness. And so from him, it's kind of endearing to me. I will say also that I like that the kids did not go for what I call the MCU moving incognito starter pack, which is a nondescript baseball cap and sunglasses, because I definitely won't recognize this dude who is built like Captain America as long as he's wearing a nondescript baseball cap and sunglasses.
Again, I would never suspect this guy. Never.
It's a mystery.
On a volcanic island.
All right, Caleb, I think that pretty much does it for our discussion of action figures. But as we always do, let's assume that people enjoyed this episode at least as much as we did. What, in your opinion, should people who enjoyed action figures be reading, watching, or experiencing?
Well, Joshua, here's the sad truth. We've talked a lot about robots on an animated discussion, both in relationship to both Batman and Superman. Because,
that's true. It's
again,
a lot of robots.
There's a lot of robots, and I feel like, again, I won't be a dead horse, but it was just a thing that was on the mind of people at the time. So I was like, for this one, I was having the hardest time coming up with one. So here's what I rolled with. A new season of Love, Death, and Robots just came out on Netflix. It's produced by David Fincher of Seven or Gone Girl fame or The Social Network fame. And it is an anthology show where animators and storytellers from across the planet tell different stories about robots. Could be, I mean, they have all sorts of stories, and there are all different art directions, art design. It's actually a pretty cool project.
Yeah, no, I've seen a few of it. I haven't seen the latest season, but it's very good and very fun. You never know with anthologies, right? But this one hits way more than it misses.
I would say so. I would say the batting average is at like 80%. Like, it's pretty high. My personal favorite, I think it was from season 1, is an episode where some yogurt becomes sentient. It's great. And we get narration from the guy who voiced Brain on Pinky and the Brain. So anyway, tremendous. If you are a fan of animation, listen to an animated discussion, and you are a fan of stories featuring robots, I say check out Love, Death, and Robots. Season 1 is great. Season 2, so far, what I've seen has also been top-notch. So, Joshua, those are my recommendations for today. How about you?
So, mine's a little weird, because the idea of Metallo living in that sensory deprivation and basically living for as long as his brain can live. He doesn't have a body to fail him, so it's really just until his brain runs out that he could live. that existential dread put me in the mind of a film that I have not seen for a while, but it is one that I would recommend. And it is 2007's The Man from Earth, which is described as like a drama science fiction film. And it's written by Jerome Bixby, who is very well known for, sci-fi films and stories. And the basic premise of this is that you've got a university professor who is leaving his home and moving on to a new job, and his friends from the university throw him an unexpected and impromptu going away party. And in the midst of this party, he decides to share with them his greatest secret, which is that he is a Cro-Magnon who has secretly survived on this earth for 14,000 years.
Ooh, interesting.
It is very interesting. It's very poignant, too, because they do a lot of talking about, what would it be like to outlive everyone you've ever known over and over and over? And what is the nature of memory, of human memory, when it goes back that far? Can it even be trusted? Is this character clinically insane? Like, is he having a break from reality, or is he in fact 14,000 years old and has been going through these motions over and over? It's a really fascinating, what I would kind of call like classic science fiction story, where you're asking these bigger questions. You're using this kind of outlandish main story to ask these bigger questions about human existence, really. And yeah, it's a little out there for this particular episode, I admit, but it's just where my mind went, thinking more and more about the way Metallo's life could go.
Poor Metallo. He could have been a good guy, but then he's John Corbin.
That about wraps it up for this animated discussion. If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to join in, come find us on Twitter. Caleb is at CMastersTalk, and I'm at Joshua Unruh, and the hashtag is Animated Discussion. Caleb, where else can people find you?
Well, Joshua, I'm the editor-in-chief and a contributor at the Cinematropolis, a website that specializes in in-depth film critique and analysis. We publish in-depth essays on all types of films, and we also have our podcast, The Cinematic Schematic. You can find all of those articles as well as the podcast brought on over at thecinematropolis.com.
Remember that an animated discussion is a Pulp Diction Productions program and is 100% supported by listeners like you. To find out how you can keep this and our other shows in production, check out patreon.com/pulpdictionproductions. Show your support by pledging at Patreon or by leaving a great review on Apple Podcasts to make it easier for more people to find us and join in the discussion.
And of course, the links to Patreon, Apple Podcasts, our recommendations, and Twitter are all very easy to find in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us for this animated discussion. We'll be back next time to talk about, drumroll please, because this one's been coming with anticipation, the next episode of the new Batman Adventures, Old Wounds.
Until next time, look! Up in the sky! It's a bird! It's a plane! It's an animated discussion!